Hello, my name is Marilyn, and I used to believe that being quiet meant being respected, that staying out of conflict made me easy to love. But one afternoon, on a road in Arizona, my husband and his sisters drove off, left me at a gas station 200 miles from home, laughing. They said it was a prank. But was it? Because what kind of family plans to abandon you? And calls it a joke? My name is Marilyn. I'm 36, live in Flagstaff, and I've been married to Trevin for 6 years. I teach art part-time at a local public school, and most days, that feels like enough. I'm not flashy, I'm not loud. I've always been the type of woman who keeps the peace, who works behind the scenes, who lets other people talk over her because she's more concerned with keeping the room calm than getting the last word. That's probably why Trevin's sisters never respected me. Maybe they thought I didn't have a spine. That Saturday, I tried to believe we were turning a corner. Trevin suggested we all drive down together to Sholo for a Memorial weekend. His words, not mine, for their late uncle. Vera booked a cabin, Callista was in charge of snacks, and I was just along for the ride, literally and figuratively. I packed sandwiches and drinks because no one else would. I charged everyone's phone power banks. I even made a playlist. I told myself this was a chance to reconnect. It had been months since anyone spoke to me like I belonged. The morning was crisp, the sky that sharp Arizona blue that makes everything seem clearer than it really is. We'd been on the road 2 hours when we pulled into a little gas station on Route 60. Trevin needed to fill up, and I offered to grab coffee for everyone. I asked how they liked it, but Vera waved me off with that condescending laugh she always used, like I was trying too hard. Just get whatever, Marilyn. We're not picky. I went inside, waited in line, used the bathroom, and when I came out, the SUV was rolling away. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe Trevin was moving the car closer. Maybe they needed to circle around for something. But they kept going. Vera was in the back seat, laughing with her head tilted back. Callista had her phone out, filming. Trevin glanced over his shoulder once, and then pressed the gas. I ran a few steps. "Hey, what are you doing?" Trevin shouted out the window. "Relax, it's just a joke." Then they were gone. I stood there for a full minute before I could even move. My hand tightened around the coffee tray until one of the cups tipped over, scalding my skin. I didn't even flinch. The clerk inside gave me a look when I walked back in, as if he'd seen this kind of thing before, like he knew how people can be. I sat on the curb, the sun beating down harder now. I pulled out my phone. No missed calls. I dialed Trevin. Straight to voicemail. "Vera? Number not available." "Callista?" She picked up. "Girl, seriously? You're so dramatic. Just Uber or something. You'll be fine." Then she hung up. I stared at the screen. Uber. In the middle of nowhere. No signal strong enough to load the app, and even if it did, who was coming all the way out here? I asked the clerk how far the nearest town was. He shrugged. 15-20 miles. You could try walking, but the sun's brutal. You'll need water. I had $37 in cash, no ID on me, no extra clothes. My wallet was in the car, my charger too. I had a phone with 40% battery and a growing realization that this wasn't a joke, this wasn't a prank. This was abandonment with a punchline. I sat on the edge of the curb and tried to breathe. In, out. I had to be calm. I could figure this out. I wasn't helpless. But it felt like I'd been slapped in front of strangers and told to laugh. What kind of person does that to their wife? I replayed the moment in my head over and over. The way Vera threw her head back, the way Trevin didn't even hesitate. He didn't look guilty. He looked amused. They'd planned this. That hit me like a freight train. This wasn't spur of the moment. There had been conversations, jokes, texts I probably never saw. How many weeks or months had they laughed behind my back, preparing this? By the time the sun dropped low enough to stop burning my scalp, I'd flagged down a passing trucker. He looked at me cautiously, like he wasn't sure if I was real. I explained, calmly, evenly, that my ride left me behind. He didn't ask questions, just nodded and said, "Hop in, I'm going as far as Springerville." He dropped me at a 24-hour diner. I thanked him, stepped inside, and ordered a coffee. The waitress didn't ask why I looked like I'd been crying. She just brought a glass of water and said, "Refills are free if you stay." I sat in the booth, phone charging at the outlet beside me, and started making a list of everything I should have noticed. The time Vera made a group chat and didn't add me. The way Callista always referred to me in third person when I was standing right there. The night Trevin came home late and laughed at something on his phone, then locked the screen when I looked. Maybe the prank wasn't the betrayal. Maybe the betrayal was never being seen. That realization didn't come all at once. It crept in slow, like a chill under the door you didn't know was open. I was still sitting in that 24-hour diner, the one with cracked vinyl booths and fluorescent lights that made everyone look a little paler than they were. My coffee had gone cold, but I wasn't drinking it anyway. I just kept staring through the window at the road outside. It looked different now. Everything did. There was a young woman in the corner booth with a baby, maybe a few months old, strapped to her chest in a soft carrier. She was feeding him with one hand, scrolling her phone with the other. I envied how calm she looked. I used to think I had that kind of calm too. Quiet, composed, agreeable. But now I knew better. Now I knew what people really saw when they looked at me. Convenient. Dismissible. My mind kept dragging me back. Not to the gas station, not to Trevin's voice yelling, "It's just a joke," but to Thanksgiving last year. It was supposed to be at our house, but Vera insisted it be at hers. "We have the bigger kitchen," she said, though I was the only one who actually knew how to roast a turkey. That night, she posted a family photo. Everyone was there. Trevin, Vera, Callista, their parents, the cousins, everyone but me. When I saw it on social media, I thought it was just cropped strangely. But then I read the caption, "Thankful for family. The original 3. That stung. Comments rolled in fast. "Vera, you 3 look like triplets. Where's the other girl again?" Trevin didn't say anything. He liked the photo. Not a word to me, not a correction. Just a double-tap approval, like I hadn't been erased in front of everyone we knew. And that wasn't the first time. A few months before, for Vera's birthday, I spent hours picking out a gift. A handcrafted pearl bracelet from a local artist. Simple, elegant, thoughtful. I wrapped it carefully, included a handwritten card. We had dinner at a steakhouse in town, the kind with white tablecloths and bread served in warm linen. When it was time to hand over the gift, Callista reached into my purse, pulled it out, and said, "From both of us." Trevin sat there. Didn't blink, didn't speak. I watched Vera unwrap the gift, her smile aimed at Callista. I felt like a ghost watching someone else's moment. I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice didn't come. And that silence, the one I'd told myself was grace, maturity, self-control, it felt like betrayal now. My own. It's strange how memory works, how little things suddenly feel loud. Like the time Vera called me domestic and dull during a family barbecue. She said it with a laugh, but the kind that stings under your skin. Or when Callista once told a mutual friend I dressed like a church librarian from 1992. When I confronted Trevin afterward, he said, "They just joke like that. Don't take it so personally." He said that a lot. Don't take it personally. Even when Vera made a toast at our wedding reception and never mentioned me once, just talked about how happy she was that her brother found someone who would keep him grounded. Trevin shrugged it off. "They're just not used to you yet," he told me. "Give them time." Time was all I ever gave. I stared at the baby across the diner, now fast asleep on his mother's chest. The woman gently rocked side to side, scrolling her phone, pausing to sip from her mug. And I sat there, realizing I'd let them teach me that I didn't matter. Not overtly. No one ever said the words. But in every omission, every shrug, every inside joke I wasn't part of, there it was. They didn't have to hit me to hurt me. They just had to act like I wasn't there. I wasn't angry, at least not in the way people expect, not loud or fiery. It was something colder, sharper, like glass settling into skin after a window breaks. You don't feel the cut at first, just the sting after it's already bleeding. I reached for my phone. The battery was at 82%. I scrolled through my photos, stopping at the one from Vera's wedding anniversary party. There was a group shot from that night. Everyone was smiling, arms around each other. I was at the very edge of the frame, half cut off, blurry, like I'd walked into someone else's picture. They always made sure I stood at the edge. That night, I stayed in the diner. I didn't ask about motels. I didn't call anyone else. I didn't cry. I just sat there thinking, not about what I had lost, but about what I was about to take back. I didn't go back to the house right away. After leaving the diner, I caught a ride with a retired nurse headed west. She didn't ask many questions, just noticed I looked tired and offered me the front seat. We talked about nothing important, road construction, the weather, how the leaves in Flagstaff were starting to turn. I held onto that normalcy like a thread, afraid that if I let go, I'd unravel right there in her passenger seat. By the time I stepped inside our house, the sun was casting long, golden fingers across the hardwood floor. The quiet was deafening. No TV murmuring from the living room, no scent of dinner hanging in the air, just a house stripped of warmth. Trevin wasn't home. His car was gone, and I didn't expect him back for hours. He had a routine. He always went to the gym after work on Mondays. A creature of habit, predictable, if nothing else. I walked through the house slowly, like it might explode if I moved too fast. Everything looked the same, and that was the most unsettling part. The coffee mug with his initials still sat in the sink, a jacket slung over the back of a chair. His cologne lingered faintly near the bedroom doorway. It was all too familiar. And yet, I didn't belong in it anymore. I sat at his desk in the spare room. It used to be our guest room, but over time, it had turned into his workspace. A place I wasn't supposed to touch, but I'd seen the way he handled my phone when it buzzed, or how he glanced at my laptop when I was grading papers. He had no problem crossing lines. I figured it was time I crossed one too. His laptop was there, open, in sleep mode, no password required. He was arrogant like that, thinking I'd never look. It took less than a minute to find it. The chat was labeled Family Fam. I almost laughed. The emoji felt like a slap. The thread was active. Last message sent just 3 days ago. I started scrolling. The first thing that stopped me wasn't a text, but a picture. A photo of me, asleep on the couch, mouth slightly open, a blanket haphazardly tossed over my legs. Caption: Queen of Nap Time strikes again. Underneath, Callista replied, "She's so boring, lol." Trevin had reacted with a laughing face. I kept scrolling. There were screenshots of our text conversations, ones I didn't even remember being particularly sensitive, shared with snarky comments like, "She really thinks we're doing this trip for Uncle Mike?" Or, "She bought snacks for the ride," as if we'd eat her dry turkey sandwiches. Vera chimed in with, "It's like having a live-in maid who cries when she doesn't get thanked." I felt my stomach twist. Then I saw it. A message from 2 weeks before the trip. Trevin: "We should ditch her for a bit, see how she handles herself." Callista: "OMG, yes, she always looks lost without you." Vera: "Let's gaslight her gently." Trevin again: "I'll drive, make it look spontaneous." My hand hovered over the trackpad. I could feel my pulse in my throat. My face felt hot. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. I read that message 3 times, not because I didn't understand it, but because I couldn't believe I was reading it at all. They planned it, not just left me behind on a whim, not just a moment of bad judgment or poor humor. It was discussed, coordinated, anticipated. They'd laughed about it. I sat back in the chair, the screen still glowing in the darkening room. They didn't just dislike me. They didn't just exclude me. They ridiculed me, reduced me. And they were proud of it. I stared at the photo of myself again. I'd been sleeping peacefully, unaware I was being mocked, turned into a meme by the people I shared my life with. And Trevin, my husband, the man who stood next to me 6 years ago and promised partnership, he was right there, laughing with them. I felt like a fool. Not because I hadn't seen the signs, but because I had. I just didn't want to believe them. I copied the entire thread, every message, every photo, every timestamp. I created a new folder on the desktop, named it Truth, and saved the files there. Then I emailed them to myself, to a backup email, to a USB I kept in my purse. I wasn't about to lose this. I didn't delete a thing. Let them find out I'd seen it. Let them know I finally opened my eyes. I closed the laptop softly, like I was tucking in a sleeping child. Then I whispered to the dark, "You wanted to test how I'd do on my own." You're about to find out. I stayed away longer than I intended. After copying the group chat, I went for a long walk through our neighborhood. The sun had started to dip behind the pines by the time I turned onto our street. I walked slowly, deliberately, my thoughts tangled in knots I didn't know how to undo. What I did know was this: I couldn't walk back into that house the same way I left it. When I finally stepped through the door, the air felt different, still, like it was holding its breath. A few feet inside, something in me tightened. My eyes scanned the space. The curtains were open, letting in the soft, late-afternoon light, but the room looked sparse, not in a clean way, in a cleared-out kind of way. I stepped into the hallway, toward our bedroom, but the moment I opened the door, I stopped. My side of the closet was empty, not partially, not reorganized, empty. Where my clothes had hung, there was now bare wood and a few scattered hangers, as if someone had left in a hurry. I turned toward the bed, the nightstand I usually used, gone, the art book I had been reading, missing. I stood there, blinking. Then I saw the bags. 3 of them, plastic trash bags, lined up neatly near the garage door. One was half open, revealing my clothes, still folded. My favorite denim jacket was peeking out. Another bag had shoes. The third had sketchbooks, my old art supplies, paint tubes half dried. On top sat a sticky note. Miss. I walked into the kitchen. The quiet was heavier there. There, on the island, was a sheet of notepad paper in Trevin's handwriting. Take a few days at your mom's. We all need to breathe. There was no sorry, no let's talk. Just that, we all need to breathe. He hadn't even written my name. I stood still for a long moment. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car drove by slowly, then faded into the distance. I picked up the note and read it again. My fingers didn't tremble. My body didn't shake. I just felt removed. Like this wasn't my kitchen anymore. Like I was trespassing in a life I used to own. I walked through the rest of the house. The family photos still lined the hallway wall, but my image had been strategically blocked in more than one of them, either by angles or by someone else's placement. A photo from our trip to San Diego sat on the sideboard, except I wasn't in it. Just Trevin and his sisters, laughing on a pier. The mug I painted during our first Christmas sat on the kitchen counter, chipped, forgotten. I had written his initials inside the handle. He never noticed. I kept walking. Every room had been touched, edited. They hadn't cleaned. They'd removed me. This wasn't about needing space. This was exile. And what stung more than anything else wasn't that he did it, but that he did it without blinking. No warning, no conversation, no confrontation. He made a decision behind closed doors and carried it out like I was luggage left in the wrong terminal. A memory surfaced. Christmas, 3 years ago. We hosted that year. I'd spent hours decorating the tree, each ornament carefully chosen. Some handmade, some collected over the years. I placed my favorite one, a small hand-carved angel from my grandmother, right at eye level. The next morning, it was gone. I asked Trevin. He shrugged. Maybe it fell. Later that day, Vera smirked and said, it didn't match the aesthetic. We moved it. I hadn't realized then how long they'd been erasing me, one small thing at a time, quietly, efficiently, until all that remained was the version of me that was useful to them, polite, silent, agreeable. I looked down at the note again. Take a few days at your mom's. The only problem was, I didn't have a mom to go to. She'd passed 5 years ago. He knew that. This wasn't an invitation to regroup. It was a directive to disappear. I picked up the note, folded it, and slid it into a Ziploc bag. Evidence. Then I turned toward the garage and opened one of the bags. I sorted through quickly. Clothes, toiletries, a few books, even my old journal from college. It was like they were emptying me from their home, but didn't want to be accused of being careless. I grabbed a suitcase from the hall closet, one of the few things they hadn't touched, and started packing properly. Not with panic, not with shame, with precision. I wasn't running. I wasn't asking for clarity. I was preparing. The last thing I packed was my sketch pad, The one Trevin once called cute before laughing at a drawing he didn't understand. I slipped it into the side pocket of my bag. When I zipped everything closed, I stood in the middle of the room that used to be mine and looked around one last time. You can push someone out, but you don't get to decide how they come back. It wasn't just my room they locked me out of, it was my entire life. The next morning, I drove into town. I hadn't slept much the night before, just drifted in and out of shallow rest at a roadside motel that smelled like mildew and leftover takeout. I checked out early and headed straight for the Budget Inn a few blocks away, hoping for something slightly better. I figured I'd put some space between me and the house while I figured out my next steps. At the front desk, the woman gave me a polite but cautious smile. ID and card, please. I handed her both without hesitation. She tapped a few keys on the keyboard, then paused. This one's not going through. I frowned. That's strange. Can you try it again? She did, twice. Then she handed it back and said, Maybe contact your bank? I nodded slowly, trying to stay calm. I reached into my wallet, grabbed my backup card, the one linked to the joint account Trevin and I opened right after we got married. It had never been a problem. Until now. Same result. Sorry, ma'am. It's declining too. I stepped aside, heart beating harder now, and called the customer service line. The hold music was painfully cheerful. After 10 minutes, someone finally picked up. Yes, hi, I said quickly. I'm trying to use my debit card, and it's being declined. Can you check the status? The woman on the other end tapped away, then cleared her throat. Ma'am, your name is no longer listed as an authorized user on this account. My mouth went dry. What? There's a note attached. It says your access was removed yesterday. The account holder requested full restriction based on concern for your emotional well-being. I stared at the wall, trying to process the words. Concern for my emotional well-being? Yes, ma'am. That's the notation we have. I thanked her, hung up, and stood there in the corner of the lobby for a long time. My hands were cold, even though the air was warm. Trevin had cut me off. He hadn't just pushed me out of the house. He'd shut the door behind me and locked me out of our finances too. And then, to add insult to injury, he labeled me unstable. That word clung to me. Not because it was true, but because it was dangerous. Men like Trevin didn't scream or hit or leave marks. They rearranged the narrative so slowly, so precisely, that by the time you realized you were being erased, it was already halfway done. I stepped outside into the parking lot, climbed into my car, and closed the door. The air felt thick. I couldn't breathe. I gripped the steering wheel and stared straight ahead. No money, no home, and now, apparently, no credibility. The tears started before I could stop them, hot and silent. I wasn't crying out of weakness. I was mourning the version of me that had believed I was loved, that had believed kindness was enough. It wasn't. I don't know how long I sat there. Eventually, I pulled out my phone. I opened my contacts and scrolled until I found the name, Rachel Kim. We hadn't talked in years, not since college. But she'd gone to law school, started a family law practice in Tucson. I didn't know if she'd even take my call. I pressed call and waited. Voicemail. Hey Rachel, it's Marilyn. I need help. I think my husband just locked me out of our joint accounts. I have some things I want to file. Can you call me when you have a minute? I hung up, then opened my notes app and started listing everything I could remember. Timeline, messages, screenshots, photos, even that stupid note he left on the kitchen island. When I got back to the motel, I had to go back. I connected to the Wi-Fi and created a folder in Google Drive titled, If Anything Happens to Me. It wasn't a threat, it was insurance. I uploaded everything, group chats, pictures, my own reflections. I made sure it was organized, so that if someone needed to piece it all together, they could. Well, I shared the folder with my personal email, and then with a second one I created just for this purpose. Then I went out and bought a prepaid phone. Cash only. From now on, anything legal went through that phone. Trevin wouldn't get another chance to twist my words or hack my intentions. That night, I sent one message from my old phone. Just one. You've crossed a line you don't get to walk back from. Then I powered it down and slid it into the back of my drawer. The burner phone lit up as I inserted the SIM card and activated it. No photos, no distractions, just a simple tool for moving forward. The next morning, I woke up with a different kind of energy. Not optimism, not hope, readiness. I wasn't out for revenge. But if they wanted to paint me as difficult, if they wanted a villain to match the story they were crafting behind my back, then I'd show them exactly what happens when a good woman stops asking for permission. I hadn't planned to go to the cafe. I just needed a place with Wi-Fi, an outlet, and a chair that wasn't covered in motel upholstery. The air was brisk, dry. I parked across the street from a quiet corner cafe and carried in a manila folder I hadn't opened since the month before our wedding. I ordered black coffee, took the farthest seat from the window, and sat facing the wall. The folder held everything from our engagement: vendor receipts, venue brochures, even the handwritten vows I drafted but never used. But what I was looking for was something else. A single page with two signatures. Mine and Trevin's. The paper was creased down the middle, as if my conscience had been trying to fold it shut for years. The prenup. Back then, Trevin had spun it as no big deal. It's just something my dad recommended. A formality, he told me, that easy smile playing on his lips. My sisters signed theirs. It's symbolic. You trust me, don't you? I did. So I signed. At the time, I had $38,000 in personal savings from my work as a freelance illustrator and part-time teacher. Trevin convinced me to put it into a joint account to build our future. He said we'd use it for a down payment on a new place eventually, or to invest in his startup. He promised we'd both have access, that it wasn't about control, just a smart step. But now I knew better. His account was untouched, mine was gone, and I had signed it away under the illusion of partnership. I held the paper in my hands, the ink faded, but legible. My name looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it always had been. I took a photo of the document and emailed it to the drive I created. If anything happens to me. I hadn't opened that drive since the day I uploaded the group chat screenshots, but now it felt like a vault, a place where the truth lived, waiting to defend me. I pulled out my old iPad. It still synced to Trevin's iCloud. He never changed the settings, probably didn't even remember it was connected. The battery was at 12%, but enough to check the voice memos. And there it was, a recording auto-saved just a week ago, labeled with a random string of numbers. I hit play. Trevin's voice. I need to get this done before Friday. She's acting weird. I think she's catching on. Then another male voice, his lawyer maybe. You want to move all the funds by end of week? Trevin. Yeah, I want everything out of the joint accounts. I'll say it's for safety. You know, emotional instability. That should hold up if she tries anything. There it was, out loud, unfiltered, manipulation dressed in concern. I paused the recording and leaned back in my chair, my jaw tight. My breath came slower now, not because I was calm, but because I was focused. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was theft, strategic, documented, premeditated, and I was done being shocked. I got out my notebook and started writing a list. Freeze remaining joint assets, if there were any left. File for temporary restraining order, financial and physical. Report unauthorized account access. Sue for manipulation of marital assets. Subpoena voice recordings and message logs if needed. I didn't cry. I didn't clench my fists. I just kept writing. When I finished, I took my coffee to go and drove straight to a printing center. I printed copies of everything, emails, photos, the prenup, the transcript of the call. Then I walked into the county legal services office and requested a pro bono consultation. The receptionist looked up, distracted. What kind of matter? Marital financial coercion, I said, clear and firm. And I have proof. She handed me a clipboard without a word. I filled it out, returned it, and booked a consult for 2 days later. Before heading back to the motel, I stopped at the post office. I opened a private P.O. box and used my maiden name. I didn't want anything tied to the address Trevin and I had shared. That house was no longer mine. It never had been. Back at the motel, I opened a new checking account online under my own name. I linked it to the burner phone. I wasn't just reclaiming money, I was reclaiming identity. Later that night, I sat at the edge of the motel bed and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about rebuilding what I let them tear down. And if Trevin wanted to test me, if they all did, then fine. Let's see how far I'll go to get myself back. The court date was set. Just seeing that sentence in the confirmation email made my chest tighten, but not from fear. It was focus, a kind I hadn't felt in a long time. I left the legal aid office with my folder of documents tucked under my arm like a shield. It held the chat logs, the audio transcript from Trevin's call with his lawyer, the prenup, copies of everything I had uploaded to that drive. Each paper was a piece of my voice, a record that I hadn't been imagining what they were doing to me all these years. I didn't go straight back to the motel. Instead, I drove to the park off Cedar and Birch, the one with the old iron benches and the duck pond that always smelled faintly of moss. I needed air. I needed to think. It had taken me weeks to pull this case together. And even with the weight of the evidence, something still didn't feel complete. There was a gap, an empty space in the narrative that only one person could fill. Eudora. She'd worked in Trevin's family for years, off and on, first as a part-time housekeeper for his parents, then occasional help when we hosted holiday dinners. She wasn't just an employee, she was a silent observer. She'd seen more than any of them realized, and if my instincts were right, she still remembered. Later that afternoon, I drove to her apartment complex near the outskirts of town. Her building was small and tucked between two larger condos, the kind of place most people didn't notice. I knocked softly, unsure if she still lived there, unsure if she'd even answer. The door opened a few inches, and then fully. Eudora looked the same, sturdy, quiet, eyes that missed nothing. She tilted her head at me and said nothing for a long beat. "I was wondering when you'd come," she said finally, stepping aside. Her living room was modest. Worn armchairs, a crocheted throw blanket, a small ceramic figurine of a bird on the side table. She poured tea without asking, set a mug in front of me, and sat down across from me with a sigh. "I know you saw things," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Even if you didn't say them out loud." She didn't look at me, just stared down at her cup. "I saw plenty." I leaned forward. "They're saying I'm unstable, that I'm exaggerating, imagining things. You were there. You know I didn't make this up." She lifted her eyes to mine. "I never believed their story, Marilyn. But I was afraid to get involved. They've always had a way of making life hard for people who don't fall in line." I nodded. "I understand, but I'm not asking for you to take sides. I'm asking you to tell the truth." She stood, walked to a drawer in the hallway, and pulled out a slim binder. "I kept this," she said, "because someday I thought you might need it." Inside were printed screenshots of texts from Callista, snide comments. Photos of me doing chores with captions like, "Live-in help with feelings." A forwarded email from Vera mocking the anniversary gift I had made for Trevin. And, most damning, a message from Trevin himself, warning Eudora not to get too attached. "She's sensitive," he'd written. "She doesn't get how our family works." I closed the binder carefully and exhaled. "Will you testify?" Eudora looked at me, and something in her face changed. "I watched them make you the joke, again and again, and I said nothing. That was my mistake. But I'm done watching." That night, I walked home with the binder pressed tight against my chest. I didn't stop at the motel. I went straight to the second-hand store down the block and found a simple blazer in my size. Not flashy, not meant to impress anyone, just clean, structured, neutral, like armor. Back at the motel, I laid everything out on the bed, the documents, the binder, the USB drive. I checked my folder twice, then 3 times, until everything was in order. Then I stood in front of the mirror and pulled my hair back into a low bun. No makeup, just me. I looked at my reflection, not as someone hoping to be believed, but as someone who knew the truth. "You don't get to choose what they call you," I said softly, "but you can choose who you answer to." and I wasn't answering to them anymore. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not the air, but the atmosphere. Like everyone inside had learned to keep their voices hushed, their expressions unreadable. No one looked each other in the eye, not unless they had to. I sat at the plaintiff's table, back straight, hands folded over my notes. Rachel, my attorney, sat beside me, calm, ready. Across from us sat Trevin, flanked by his attorney, and on the far side, Vera and Callista. They weren't required to be there, but of course they came. Vera was in some kind of dark green blazer, too expensive to look casual, but not formal enough to be called respectful. Callista wore black, oversized sunglasses on top of her head like a crown. Trevin looked like a man trying to remember whether smirking counted as contempt in court. Eudora was behind me, in the second row. She hadn't said much when we met that morning, just nodded, held up her binder, and said, "It's time." The judge entered. We all stood, and just like that, it began. Trevin's lawyer went first. He spoke in that smooth, detached tone attorneys use when they want to sound reasonable. He called me unstable, said I had a history of emotional reactivity, that my actions had been erratic, deliberately inflammatory, and that I had manipulated narrative to gain sympathy. They presented screenshots, cut from context. They showed a message I'd sent to Trevin last year, frustrated after his sister's third uninvited visit in a month. "I feel like I don't exist in this marriage." His lawyer leaned on that one. Clearly, there was a pre-existing pattern of victimization and irrational thinking, he said, gesturing with open palms like he was laying out a fact, not an opinion. Rachel didn't flinch. Neither did I. When it was our turn, Rachel stood slowly. Her first sentence was a quiet thunderclap. "We have the full threads, the audio, and a witness." The courtroom shifted. Eudora stood when called and made her way to the witness box. Her voice trembled slightly as she was sworn in, but once she began speaking, the tremor vanished. She talked about the years she'd worked in their home, the things she overheard, comments made when they thought she wasn't listening, the laughter at my expense, the dismissiveness, the coordination. She described the way Vera would edit holiday decorations I put up, the way Callista once joked that I was the houseplant with opinions. The moment Trevin told her not to encourage me when I asked about organizing a family reunion. Then she held up the binder, printed emails, screenshots, messages from Trevin warning her to stay professional, jokes from Vera about how it'd be hilarious to see how Marilyn handled being stranded, and one message from Trevin, dated 5 days before the trip. "I'll drive. Let's make it spontaneous." Silence. The judge leaned forward. "Can you confirm this message was sent from Mr. Trevin's phone?" "Yes, Your Honor," Eudora replied. Rachel approached the bench and opened a manila envelope. Inside were the full chat logs, printed, highlighted, every single word. She placed them in front of the judge. "This is not a narrative," she said calmly. "This is a record." I watched Trevin's face change. For the first time, he wasn't smirking. Vera's complexion shifted red, then pale. She whispered something to Callista, who refused to meet her eyes. Their lawyer stood and requested a recess. "Denied," the judge said, voice clipped. The rest of the hearing blurred. Technical points, legal phrasing, procedural summaries, but I heard every word of the ruling. Immediate dissolution of marriage. Restitution of shared assets, including the full amount I had contributed. Acknowledgement of emotional damages. No further contact unless through legal channels. When the gavel finally fell, I sat still. Rachel leaned over and whispered, "It's over." But it wasn't. Not quite. Outside, in the hallway, as we waited for the clerk to process our papers, Vera stepped toward me. Her voice was low, sharp. "You'll regret this, Marilyn." I turned slowly, not angry, not shaken, just clear. "No," I said, "you'll regret assuming I wouldn't fight back." And I walked away, not fast, not triumphant, just steady. I didn't look back. It's been a year. A full year since the courtroom, the ruling, and the long walk down that courthouse hallway where Vera hissed her final threat. I remember every step I took that day, but I don't revisit them often. I don't need to, because my life now sounds different. It feels different. Not in a dramatic, movie-ending kind of way, just quieter, steadier. Freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like silence, and I've never heard it this loud. My apartment in Santa Fe is small but bright. The adobe walls hold the morning light like something sacred. I wake up to the sounds of doves outside my window, not the silence of judgment or the ticking of someone else's schedule. I brew my own coffee. I pick my own music. I decide how the day unfolds. That morning, I stood barefoot in my kitchen, sipping from a mug I glazed myself. I had an art exhibit that evening, my first solo showing. Just local work, small pieces, but it was mine, all mine. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I was just telling the truth in brushstrokes. Later that day, on my way to the gallery, I passed by a bookstore and ducked inside to leave a flyer about the show. As I placed it on the counter, I caught sight of a magazine near the register. My breath caught, not out of fear but recognition. Vera's face, a small blurb in the corner. Executive resigns amidst internal HR review. I didn't need to read it. I already knew. After the trial, someone at her firm got hold of the court transcripts, the emails, the chat logs. It didn't take long before her mentorship platform and personal brand of woman empowerment fell apart. There are some masks you can't wear after the truth comes out. I heard Trevin now lives with a friend across town, unemployed. He tried to start a podcast about healing through hardship, but the local community didn't forget the way he tried to gaslight a woman and call it growth. Callista lost a few major sponsors. Apparently, one of her brand deals pulled after her messages mocking me resurfaced. And the video where she laughed at watching someone try to stay relevant with crafts and casseroles didn't age well. Not one of them reached out, not one apology, not even a note. But that's fine. Because one afternoon, about a month ago, I received a hand-drawn card in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Lumen, Vera's daughter. The front was a crayon drawing of a house and a tree. Inside, stick figures holding hands. One was labeled me. The other was labeled you. Underneath it, she wrote, "I miss when you used to tuck me in." I stared at it for a long time. Vera once said, "Marilyn just likes to look useful." Turns out, I was more than useful. I was safe. I was kind. I was noticed. That meant more than any courtroom victory ever could. 2 days later, while going through an old box marked studio stuff, I found a letter I had forgotten about. Still sealed, still tucked behind some sketch pads from our old house. The return address read, Odessa, my former mother-in-law. I sat on the floor, legs crossed, and opened it slowly. "If they ever make you feel small," it read in her careful handwriting, "remember I saw you. I saw all of you. You made this family better than they ever deserved. I just never had the courage to say it out loud." The tears came, not from pain, from release, from finally feeling like I wasn't the only one who knew the truth. She saw me. That night, I arrived at the gallery early. I helped set up the easels, adjust the lights, pin the small artist bio card next to each canvas. They weren't masterpieces, but they were honest, and they carried every ounce of what I lived through. As the space began to fill with visitors, strangers, neighbors, local artists, I noticed a woman staring at one of the larger paintings, a blend of shadows and gold tones, textured, a little raw. She turned to me. "Is this based on a true story?" she asked. I smiled. "They're based on what happens when you survive something you were never meant to escape." She nodded. "It's beautiful." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. I didn't check my phone that night. I didn't need to post an update or share a story. I didn't need likes or hearts or someone else's words to validate my experience, because I knew, and the people who mattered knew. I didn't go back, and I never will. Sometimes, what breaks us isn't the loudest betrayal. It's the quiet erosion of being unseen, unheard, unvalued. Marilyn's story is a reminder that walking away isn't weakness. It's survival, it's power, it's clarity. Have you ever been pushed out by the people who were supposed to protect you? What would you have done in her place? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more real, powerful family stories that stay with you long after the video ends.